Well, now all my secrets are out in the open, aren't they? It's a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. Just reflecting on golden moments and joys and challenges of getting older. So I think sometimes our society doesn't always appreciate those of us who are a little bit longer in the tooth and have a bit of grey hair. But I just think older people are fantastic. They have so much knowledge, so much life experience. So, yeah, it's a broad topic and it can touch on all our lives if we're privileged enough to grow older. As I reflected on dear Ange's request and how lovely that you're able to be here, Ange, you've surprised us all. As I reflected on today's topic, my own challenges of ageing came to the fore as well, as I did not remember all Ange and I had talked about initially, and I had to ask Ange again, what was the actual topic? So if I look at you blankly sometimes, it's not because I'm being rude, it's due to the fact that my memory's not so good these days, and I can't always quickly recall someone's name. There is one dear lady in this church who is present today. She knows who she is, and I constantly get her name wrong and go home feeling mortified that I've called her the wrong name. So please forgive me if I do that to you. It's not intentional, it's just that I'm a little older. So as I pondered on the joys and challenges of getting older, I reflected on conversations with my dear brother, when we sometimes recall Dad's remarks in his latter years, and Dad would say, "We have a lot to be thankful for, don't we, dear?" He could say that even in light of having lost two of our dearly loved family members. It wasn't easy for him. He could say that even in the light of having lost them, it was still a lot to be thankful for. And I've always taken that on board and thought, wow, Dad, that's pretty amazing stuff. In other words, we could say getting older is not giving up, but choosing to see the privileges and opportunities that arise despite getting older. As has been mentioned by Tanya, I worked as a BAP care chaplain for a number of years, and I was privileged to sit with numerous residents as they told me their stories, some of which were amazing. One woman who had escaped her homeland during World War II and actually walked through forests to get away to safety. It was such a privilege to hear of her incredible difficulties and how she faced that and then came to Australia and established a new life. I was blown away by her courage and her inner capacity to be able to cope with that. It was a joy to share the lives of those who were older and to support them as they faced their final days. It was also a privilege to lead many farewell services for residents, and some of the stories were incredibly sad. I won't share them with you, but for some folks, being able to let go at the latter stage of life was incredibly difficult and hard on everybody who supported them. So out of those experiences of sitting with residents and their family members as different ones slipped away, I became aware that death is not something to fear. It's one of those stages of life that I don't think we fully understand, but there is a spiritual realm around the end of life that we can enter. And it's interesting that there are a few recorded stories of people who have faced end of life and then actually have come back to life, and they make very interesting reading. Stories of seeing light and a long tunnel and passing through to something more. And one of the BAP care stories I recall was of a woman. She was actually someone who played for our chapel services, and she was a woman of really great faith. Her daughter told me that a few days before her mum passed away, her mum had heard her favourite hymn coming from the walls. When I checked if anyone had been with Rose at that time, I was told that she was completely on her own without any musical device in her room. That dear lady just slipped away so peacefully, and it was because of her faith, and that gave her a sense that all would be well. And then from a personal perspective, the reality of growing older can be associated with limits, and for me, it came much earlier than I anticipated. I had been working, as you've heard, in residential aged care. My intention was to keep working for quite some time. However, the energy required in achieving theological study at a mature age while working part-time with my ongoing health issues that have been with me for a lot of years and drive me crazy, that's another story. But it all took its toll, and I became aware that I didn't have the energy required to continue my role, and with very mixed feelings, I retired. It was a challenging time for me because I felt of little use. I wasn't that old. Our family were mature adults by then, leading their own lives, so they didn't need me to help on a daily basis. Adding to that was the fact that I had had a fall and was on crutches for 5 months. So there was plenty of time for reflection over a 2-year period, plus adjusting to a change of pace in my life. Out of that situation of feeling on the fringe, I have learnt that growing older in a positive manner can be a challenge for us. However, I think the joys and challenges of getting older can also provide us with a wonderful opportunity for growth and change. Now, that might seem like pie in the sky kind of thinking, but let's reflect on what is possible despite the limitations we might live with. For most of us, and probably all of us, life has presented challenges along the way. Some of those might be personal health challenges, or they could be the loss of a very dearly loved family member. And those things are huge and not to be minimised. So we need time to adjust to the changed circumstances of our lives, I think. How we have faced and dealt with those challenges is what has made us who we are today, as I'm sure you are aware. We cannot change what has happened to us along the journey of life. How we learn from and use those experiences with God's help is what will enable us to grow older with a peace of sense and well-being. Last week, I spoke with a dear woman in her early 90s who has an amazing attitude to growing older. She commented that she is a determined person who sets and achieves goals. Each day, she sets goals for herself, 3 goals every day. Some of the goals she chooses require considerable physical and mental effort on her part. She still mows her own lawn and does her own gardening. But that doesn't daunt her. I was staggered when she shared with me what she does. I left her feeling encouraged and inspired regarding ageing well. To me, it seems possible that if we look for the golden moments in our lives, we can all achieve a level of joy despite the limitations that we might live with. Even something as simple as thinking of ways we may be grateful, things we may be grateful for on a daily basis, can help us reframe how we are feeling, enabling us to be more positive. Sometimes it means changing what we're doing, stepping outside, listening to some music, doing something that helps us to change that mindset. It's interesting to note that scientific research has shown that the neuroplasticity of our brains is not damaged as we age. We think we lose capacity, but in actual fact, our brain is still able to keep working and replace the way that we think. I was fascinated by that because there are neural pathways, as you probably know, that our brains have, and we can actually change those neural pathways by how we think, by how we approach life on a daily basis. So we might be getting older, we might be more limited health-wise in what we can do physically, but we can change how we think and we can be positive even though life might be throwing some very curved balls at us. One of the privileges of ageing, I believe, is having time to do the things we enjoy, which we mightn't have been able to do when we were busy raising a family, busy working, keeping up with life's requirements. Something which nourishes my soul, and as you've probably heard, and it might be yours as well, is getting out in the garden, getting outside. I'm a bit of a bushie at heart, and I love to get out and do hard physical work. There's nothing like getting out there and digging in the garden. It does you the world of good if you can do it. And not only is there joy in seeing the plants flourish, but the connection with nature does something for me. In our garden, we were very privileged to be given a bird bath, a beautiful bird bath, and then we bought a second one, so we've got one at the back of the house, or sort of at the sides of the house they are. And it's such a privilege to watch the birds come in every day, and the number of different varieties of birds that we get coming in for a drink. And they come in and sing. We've currently got a rufous whistler who's flying into our alfresco, pecking at the windows and calling away, and she's just beautiful. And little simple things like that can lift our soul. They really can change our day. And some of the things, that nourish our soul is such an awareness these days about being outdoors. There's a lot of stuff around health and well-being, and a lot of it's to do with getting outside and breathing the fresh air and being able to see the sky. There's something about, I don't know about for you, but for me, knowing that the sun rises every day, that is a link for me to God, because I believe God is sustaining the earth, sustaining that rising of the sun every day. So when I see that sun coming up, it's like, thank you, Lord. That's just another instance of your love and care for this planet. So I think those things can rejuvenate us if we take the time and energy to allow that to happen. I think getting older can also be a time to create new dreams. Yeah, that might sound a bit left field, I know. But things that can give us meaning. Now, I'm not talking about something like skydiving, okay? That might be a bit out there for some of us. But it's things that are simpler than that we can achieve. Golden moments can also occur when connecting with other people. Now, haven't we just proven that this afternoon? Sitting here around the tables, sharing life together. And how rich is it to be able to do that with one another? We learn from one another. We help grow in our understanding and appreciation of other people and what life has been for them, which might be quite different to our experience, but it helps us in our thinking and understanding. And sometimes it might be just as simple as smiling at somebody we don't know. Someone who crosses our path, just giving them a smile or a bit of a good day. It can lift somebody's day and make a difference. So I think there are things that we can do as we get older, things that we can achieve, things that we can feel are positive and that not only lift our soul, but help other people along the journey. And sometimes it might be just enjoying hobbies. I know there's a number of people here who like doing woodwork. And there's something about working with wood or something tactile, isn't there? Or you've all got different hobbies, I'm quite sure. For some of the women, not so much for me. It's knitting. I can't knit much anymore with arthritis in my hands, but there's endless possibilities. And there's some dear folks here who are artists. We have a gorgeous daughter-in-law who's an artist who paints birds, and she's just been up to Brisbane to an awards ceremony because she's doing so well. But there's all sorts of hobbies that we might be able to develop as we age and things that give us a sense of purpose and joy. So I don't see getting older as just a time of letting go. It can be that, for sure. Letting go of some of the things we maybe cannot do or some of the folks who are no longer with us. And there needs to be time to acknowledge that and journey with that pain. And it might mean relinquishing a particular responsibility, which is no longer possible for us to fulfil. And when our identity can be tied up in a role, that can be hard work. It takes us some time to work through that and process the fact that who am I without that persona, without that role that has shaped me and given me significance. So there can be a sense of loss, but there are right ways to work with that, I believe. And I think letting go of past hurts. can be a challenge, but can also give us a great sense of freedom. Because I'm sure everybody in this room, if we went around and asked you, have you been hurt by somebody in your life? I'm sure every hand would go up in the room. We've all been hurt by various things that have occurred to us along the way, and it's how we journey with those, how tightly we hold them, or whether we can let them go with open hands and learn from them. So there's a challenge in that, I think, for us as we get older. So you might like to think about your own ageing process and what's possible for you in the days ahead. Please don't give up because you are older. Keep thinking about what each day might bring for you, what might give you joy, what might enrich someone else's life. So hopefully what we're sharing today will lift your soul and encourage you so that you can face each day with a sense of well-being and hope. Alan is going to come and speak to us too about letting go of earthly things, I think. So we'll hand over to him, and then there will be some time for reflection after that.
Thanks, Ruth. So it is time to introduce Alan. It's a pleasure to introduce Alan. Alan went from a potato farmer to pastor and has been instrumental in fostering and growing our multi-generational church here over 3 decades. He is married to Loris, is a proud father of 3 and grandfather to 11 grandchildren. He is an avid reader and gardener and loyal Collingwood supporter. Please welcome Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya, and good afternoon. I almost always say good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here. When Ange asked me, could I speak at a gathering for seniors, I said, oh, sure. And I envisaged perhaps a dozen or so of my friends from church sitting out in the other room, and it didn't quite turn out like this. Maybe this was always Ange's intention, but lovely to see so many of you and to see some people that I haven't seen for some time. That's been great. It's just been great to share over the tables, and I hope that continues for some time. Funny you should mention Collingwood, Tanya. At the ripe old age of 25 or 26, I hung up my football boots. Now, I was never going to have a career as an AFL footballer, far from it, but I really enjoyed playing for our team in a minor country league, and I reckon I still had a few good years left. But we were farming at the time, milking cows and growing potatoes, as Tanya mentioned, and both of these are pretty physical activities, and I was starting to accumulate a few injuries. What if I copped something serious? Loris and I were married, and we had at least one young child. I actually know how many children we have. I just can't remember exactly when I stopped playing football. I've heard your memory can become a bit unreliable as you get older. So I was faced with a question of priorities. Which was more important, football or family? Put like that, yeah, it was a no-brainer. I hung up my football boots. I didn't actually throw them away. And for the next few seasons, I looked at them and I wondered, perhaps I could manage one more year. I never did. It's not so hard to give up something for the sake of something better. At the ripe old age of 32, and I am sure about this one, we sold the farm that had been in my family for 3 generations and we moved to Melbourne. I loved the challenge of farming. I'm a little bit like Ruth in this, I think. Planting something, watching it grow, harvesting a crop, seeing a return for my work most years. and I still love being out in the open air and the sunshine. Was it hard to sell the family farm? In one way, yes, but again, there was this sense of letting something go in order to pursue something better. And in our case, that was Bible college. And that's a whole other story. And that's enough about me. Thinking about these things in the context of this afternoon and the joys and challenges of growing older, I realised that those joys and challenges have always been there in different ways in every phase of life. Let me quickly run through some of those phases, and you may like to reflect on what life was like for you as you passed through them. Of course, we start life as relatively helpless little babies. You probably don't remember that phase. Totally dependent on others. It's kind of nice, isn't it, to have others do things for us. But babies soon start to sacrifice a little of that security in order to gain a little independence. And that process continues. Watch our little ones start to grow. How satisfying is that? See them pull themselves up on the nearest bit of furniture and take those first wobbly steps. That's pretty exciting for parents and child. Soon they're happy to forget all about crawling, mostly. Walking is a whole lot better. School is another step. Give up some more security, gain a bit more independence. Except, of course, these days there are some steps in between before we get to school, aren't there? Did any of you go to kindergarten before school? Or most people shake me. What about, did anyone go to childcare? We turned out okay though, didn't we? High school, for me, seemed a bit big and scary after our little country primary school. How about you? Was there a sense of letting go in order to go to something bigger and better? Secondary school coincides with the adventures of puberty and adolescence. Now, that's a time for change. Joys and challenges, and not necessarily in that order. Things to let go. New and exciting things ahead. Some difficulties and awkwardness to be negotiated. Would anyone like to return to your teenage years? Lots of heads shaking. Raise your hand. I wouldn't mind having some of that energy, but other than that, don't take me back there. And then our paths start to diverge. After secondary school, some of you went on to further education and training. Some of us joined the workforce. More independence, more responsibilities. Leaving home is a big change for some around this time. Letting go of mum's cooking and housekeeping. Discovering a fresh appreciation for mum's cooking and housekeeping. Loris and I lived at home until we were married. What a huge change, and one that we were certainly looking forward to. Not for everyone, of course, but very significant for those who choose to marry. Perhaps matched only by the arrival of children. Lots to let go when our children are born. Such a blessing, each one, so very different. Lots of challenges. And the changes keep coming. Some of them are expected and some catch us by surprise. The joys and challenges of work and a career path. We won't take the time to consider the complexities and the changes, and there are many of them that take place through our middle years. I almost want to say suddenly we find ourselves where we are today. And of course, it didn't happen suddenly, did it? But those years now seem to have flown by so quickly. I can't believe that I'm as old as I am today, except when I get out of bed and my body reminds me. Where did that time go? I'm not quite sure I'm ready for this. But here we are. Looking back over life's different stages, it seems now that the whole of life to date has been preparing us for this stage. And we've let go so much to get here, haven't we? Either willingly or reluctantly. I'm not sure I want to call this the final or the last stage of life. That sounds a bit final, a bit gloomy even. The challenges of this later phase are quite different from those we worked through earlier, and so are the joys. Some of us who may have breezed through those earlier stages with little concerns over health may be forced to concede that our bodies are not only ageing, they're wearing out, and they need more maintenance now than we have offered them previously. We find our joys in other ways too now, where once there may have been a sense of satisfaction through personal achievement, I find great satisfaction these days from the achievements of others, especially grandchildren. As Tanya mentioned, we have 11 grandchildren aged from 9 to 24. What a joy to see them move through those earlier phases of life and the chance that we have to celebrate their achievements along the way. Another of the challenges is an awareness now of the limitations of time, even perhaps a sense of time running out. I'm not a great fan of the bucket list concept. I know others have a range of things that they want to do while there's some smiles going on there. I'm going to check about the bucket list over there later perhaps. There are things that I may once have thought important though, don't seem to be so important now. This might sound a bit strange, but the first lines of an old hymn have been coming back to me lately. Many of you may have heard it. It is a bit obscure, but it starts, "Spirit of God, descend upon my heart, wean it from earth, through all its pulses move." And I've been thinking about that phrase, "wean it from earth." It's an interesting one. And many of you will have a more personal understanding of the term weaning than I do. Weaning is a process for stopping something, as opposed to a sudden and abrupt stop. I wonder if that starts to happen naturally as we grow older. Some of the things that we valued when we were young, things like our possessions or even some experiences, just don't seem to be so important anymore. I mentioned before my reluctance to describe this as the last phase of life. As a Christian, I look forward to another life when this one is finished, and I'm sure many of you do too. Don't get me wrong, I'm in no great hurry to get there, but this sense of anticipation helps me navigate some of the challenges now and to face some others that may well be ahead. It also helps me to find joy in some of the simpler things around me. Is God weaning me away from the things that I'm going to have to let go anyway? Is he reminding me of better things ahead? John Wesley used to say to those around him, "And the best is still to come." That's a good reminder for us today. My football boots are long gone, and so is any desire to run around a footy ground chasing a football, which is probably just as well. I am looking forward to the joys that remain in this life. Maybe there are some surprises still ahead, along, I'm sure, with some challenges still to be negotiated. And after that, some joys that I'm sure are beyond my ability now to imagine. Thank you for listening to Ruth and me this afternoon. It's been our privilege to share some thoughts about a stage of life that we're well and truly into. We're finished. Now it's your turn, and we're just going to hand over to you in your tables, perhaps to reflect on some of the things that we've been sharing today, or share something totally different if that's your, that's your prerogative now. But perhaps you'd like to share around your tables some of the joys and challenges that you've experienced on your way through to this stage, and anything that you may be anticipating in the days ahead. So we're going to hand that over to you now and give you a few moments before we wrap up. There's still a little bit to happen, but feel free to discuss amongst yourself the things that we've shared and the things that have come to your mind, and maybe some memories of days gone by. It's over to you.